All right, everybody, I have the one and only Matt Tim on the phone. We're going to talk about this incident happened down in Columbia County with the two deputies, Deputy Carpet Muncher and Sergeant Douchebag, who violated that man's rights. And one of the things that I said is that we got to have a modified qualified immunity or eliminate it altogether. But the main thing is that the officers should have liability insurance, that they have a dog in a fight, and if they are continued violators and keep getting sued and cost the town money, that their insurance rates will go through the ceiling and they will not be able to afford it anymore. Thus, they will not be a cop. Now, Tim brought up a thing and said, well, we got to do something about the indemnification, and so, which is something I didn't understand right off the bat. But so Matt is here, and we're going to have a discussion about that. So, Matt, based on what I just said about modifying the qualified immunity, making the officers have insurance, having a situation where if an officer acted in good faith and was not being criminal or retaliatory in his actions, that yes, then the taxpayer should be, the employer, aka the taxpayer, should be on the hook for the cost of the lawsuit. Now, if you got a situation where you have Officer Carpet Muncher and Deputy Douchebag there, where they clearly engaged in unlawful behavior, it was retaliation against this man's rights, because the man invoked his rights and they got upset and they retaliated and escalated it into an arrest. So, Matt, take it over and tell me what we were just talking about.
Well, the first thing is this. In a lot of the pro-union states, New Jersey, New York, California, chiefly among them, the problem is, even if you get a judgment against police officers, they're entirely indemnified, 100%. And what that means is that the judgment will be paid by the general public.
So let me ask you, what is the difference between qualified and indemnification? Because it sounds to me like it's the same thing. If you got qualified immunity and you screw up, the taxpayers pay.
No, qualified immunity means that a judgment can never be assessed against them. They're immune from liability. Whereas indemnification means even if a judgment is lodged against them, that the general public will pay that judgment.
Okay, so there's a lot of people out there, including myself up until now, were didn't understand the foley with the qualified immunity, because I thought that's what that was, but I understand the term indemnification. That I understand, and go ahead.
Whereas right now, John, if they have qualified immunity, you're almost entirely screwed, because that means that regardless who's paying out, if they have qualified immunity, you can't get any kind of a judgment
Against the officer.
Against anybody. If their actions are immune, that means that a lawsuit cannot be had.
All right,
which
so
is horrible.
You're agreeing with me that I said that, I'll just reiterate what I said, that if the officer acted in good faith and did what he was supposed to do and didn't do it with malicious intent, that he should be off the hook. Because I guess you could say that there is some truth to the officers saying that, well, if we're going to be held personally liable, then nobody's going to want to be a cop, which
I just... If it's having an effect on enforcement, they're going to do the bare minimal. That's their other argument.
Well, yeah, but also that would take away some of the escalating, don't you think?
Yes and no. Yes and no. I mean, right now, there's a fine line between proactive enforcement and turning things into Nazi Germany. There's a very fine line between the two extremes.
Well, I think it's safe to say that we are going in that direction. There's too many videos out there, stories out there. Just look at my channel. I got 800 of them, 800 plus, approaching 900 of stories of bad cops going out there and violating people's rights and hurting them. How are we going to stop it? Because the only way to stop it is through the pocket.
We've seen the blind guy get accosted by law enforcement. Before that, there was a guy in the wheelchair in the Walmart.
Yeah, he got shot in the back, and the guy put one more in him for good measures.
They filled that guy full of lead. He was a practicing dummy for them.
Yes.
First, in states like New Jersey, New York, and California, we need to end full indemnification as soon as possible.
All right, so we need to do a modified indemnification and a modified qualified immunity.
Well, I don't like immunity at all, because immunity says that when there is a screw-up, nobody's going to have to pay out. I like just indemnification. So if a cop does make an innocent error, but somebody still gets screwed because of that error, at least in that point, somebody's going to have to be paid out. I don't agree with any kind of immunity. I think that law enforcement officers should be judged by the same standard as anybody else. They're not
same
judged,
standards like, like a lawyer, I'll give you a lawyer or a doctor. You got to get your liability insurance, and if you screw up, you're personally held liable. And if you keep screwing up, it gets to the point where either you lose your license or your insurance becomes so expensive that you can't practice anymore.
That's right.
I mean, how much does liability insurance malpractice cost for a lawyer in the state of New Jersey? What do you think it is?
In New Jersey, we don't. In New Jersey does not mandate malpractice insurance. What New Jersey does, and it's clever, they have something called the CPF, and the CPF stands for Client Protection Fund. So what they do is every year when an attorney pays his or her dues to the state bar that's regulated through the Supreme Court, New Jersey Supreme Court, what they'll do is a portion of your annual attorney's dues will go into the Client Protection Fund, and they'll pay out claims. If the lawyer is insolvent, so if the lawyer goes bankrupt, the Client Protection Fund, which all the lawyers collectively pay into, will pay out.
Oh, so that's sort of like how the towns here get together and pool their money together to pay off lawsuits.
Precisely, exactly. And
now, you take like a doctor's malpractice suit, if a doctor hurts somebody, their malpractice is like over $100,000 a year.
Easy. A pediatrician's in between $30,000 and $50,000.
I know when I was in the two-way radio business, and I got basic liability insurance, and there was limitation as to what I could do in that job. On my job, of course, I didn't tell the insurance company all the things that I did. They said, "Oh, you can't do this, you can't do that." All right, yeah, sure, okay, whatever. But basically, my liability insurance was costing me $1,000 a year, and this is going back, I want to say 15 years ago. It was costing me $1,000 a year for a $1 million policy, and that $1 million policy would be paid out 2 times. In other words, if I got 2 separate lawsuits and it was $1 million each, that my insurance company would pay for both of them. But if there's any more lawsuits after that, I was up the creek. And what would happen is that my liability insurance would just get so expensive that you just like, do I want to pay $50,000 to do $10,000 a month in business?
That's right. And you know what I say, how we handle the police liability problem in New Jersey? The first step is licensure, okay?
Well, we have that in New Jersey, though. I got to start asking the cops around that about that licensing, because it seems like they implement it, but I don't hear any more talk about it.
It's on the books only. But it's not like California, where California has a peace officer standardization training post. I agree with that, because here's why, John. When somebody gets to be enough of a nuisance or enough of a miscreant, you just take away their license to be a police officer.
Right,
That's
exactly. Because here in New Jersey, as I said in the video, all they need here in New Jersey is have a certificate from a police academy to become a police officer. And if things go wrong in one department, they just resign and get a job in another police department.
That's right.
And that's what's got to stop, because we all know how the good old boys are. Well, why did you leave Smithtown? Well, I left Smithtown because, it was a little problem there. Okay, son, I understand, though. So we don't want you to do that here, okay, son? So make sure you don't do it here. It's like
the other thing that goes hand in hand with civil liability and expanding how much police officers are going to be civilly liable for their actions, John, making sure that crap like this blind man who was accosted, that they're held criminally liable. They openly and blatantly violated that man's civil rights.
Right. I mean, there was a retaliatory. There should be some kind of crime there for retaliation. Not just they retaliated against that man implementing his rights. It's the same thing if you're out there taking a picture and the cop goes and arrests you because you were pointing a camera. This guy, Ted, what's your reasonable articulate suspicion? And they got all pissed off, and now you got this problem. And And all these cops are doing, they got, our Deputy Carbon Muncher gets 2 days unpaid vacation, and she's got to go back to Police Academy for 095. She's got to learn about people's civil rights.
I'm going to make a bet right now that if that was in Florida, I still think that there's a chance it was in South Carolina. I could be wrong.
No, I'm pretty sure. No, it's Florida, because when I went on Facebook, I saw two different Columbia counties, and I went for the one in Florida.
Well, if that's the case, the state attorney is going to probably pursue charges against those cops. I give it a 60% chance.
Well, what kind of charge is it going to be?
Violating the man's civil rights. That's a crime in almost all 50 states.
Is it? Well, how about kidnapping? Because they put the handcuffs on him, took him away against his will.
That's too much of a stretch. Too much of a stretch. They violated his civil rights. All right. The second thing that they did do is it's a case of official misconduct, abuse of power. Those types of charges should be lodged. I don't think that the sergeant is more responsible than the officer for one reason and one reason only. And this is and it's too legalistic for me to go into details here. But I do feel that both of them should be criminally charged. I do.
Well, I agree. Also, I think the sergeant really is the bad actor, because he's the sergeant. You take a test to become a sergeant, and as far as I know, all the questions on the sergeant test pertain to law and procedures.
Well, the other question that arises goes like this: he wasn't present for the entire encounter, was he?
She stopped him, and I want to say maybe a minute into the video, or maybe a minute and a half into the video, when he asked for a supervisor, she goes, "He's right over there. He's coming now."
So I think that he has a pretty strong defense that he could always say, and I'm speculating here, but it very well could be the case that she left out important details as to that man's detainment, as to that man's detention, that he was not aware of.
He articulated to him what happened, that he got stopped, and he pulled out, he pulled the thing out of his back pocket. I was afraid the cop was going to shoot him, but he pulled it out and showed it, and that should have been the end of it right then and there. But it's the sergeant who ordered the deputy to arrest him for resisting arrest. Now, interestingly, in the state of Florida, resisting against an unjustifiable, unlawful arrest is permitted under Florida law.
Oh, yeah.
So,
in New Jersey, it's not.
Right. But, resisting arrest could be just you just pulling away briefly, maybe.
That's right.
Look at the lady there, my friend Audrey Capps there, who was arrested for under suspicion of DWI, and was picked up by that cop and slammed on the ground. He picked her up and slammed her down because she pulled away. He said, "No, wait, I want to call my husband." And he picked her up, and she got arrested, got charged with resisting. So
she ultimately wound up pleading out to the resisting.
Yeah, but you know what? She's going to have a healthy. At some point, whenever that lawsuit gets settled, and I have to get a hold of her sometime and see where we're at in that thing, but. Anyway, not to get off track on that, but
I was against her taking that deal in the first place. I mean, we can't let this system get any more.
Well, she hasn't taken any deal as of yet. Last I communicated with her, it was her and another person were both suing the department over that bad cop, and you know how it is. It takes forever for these.
Absolutely.
They think if they can beat the charge, but how are they going to beat the charge? They fired the cop was charged, and he was fired, and so that to me, that's an open and closed case.
That's an admission.
That's an admission. Just like that sheriff down here in Florida got up there and apologized, and he basically just admitted, just by sheer response to the deputy and to the two deputies, where they're being suspended and sent for training. That's an admission of guilt right there, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm no lawyer.
Well, when I referred to the deal she took, I meant the plea deal, John. I meant pleading guilty to
for the criminal charges.
Yes. I'm against even that. I mean, at that point, when he was under criminal investigation, had she pled not guilty, guess what? The state's case would have fallen apart, because for him to have testified, he would have implicated himself.
Well, I think there must be more to it that we don't know, because I would, a lot of these cases where the cops are blatantly violating somebody's rights, they drop those charges, and no doubt they have a talk in the back room. Look, we're going to drop the charges. Take it easy on us. Immediately that happens.
One of two mentalities pervades. The first mentality is they drop the charges and say, take it easy on us. Or two, they dig their heels in and they create a bigger lie to cover up the smaller one. One of the two things happen.
Yeah, well, that poor woman, she got a rib removed. She got several ribs broken. I think one of them, she said, was removed. Discussing what happened with that. But anyway.
And all that happened to that cop was, what did he get? 300 days in county prison. Oh,
I don't think he even got that. But, once again, it's a taxpayer. And the same thing's going to happen down in Florida. You got two dopies. They're going to cost, I hope Mr. Hodges gets $1 million out of them. And since
I got bad news for you, John. Florida doesn't have an indemnification statute. They have to pay out of their own pocket down there.
Out of whose pocket? The cop's pocket?
Ding, ding, ding. Yes, sir.
Well, they're going to file they're going to get the judgment. Then they're going to file bankruptcy, but I'll have to be put as punitive damages, because then you can't file that on the bankruptcy, right?
Judgments are not dischargeable in bankruptcy. Entirely.
Right, I was just saying, there's got that whole lawsuit will be punitive damage. But I'm going to give you an example. So say you went in business with somebody and you split up. It all went to hell, and you were accused of stealing your partner's $10,000. So they'll get a judgment where you got to pay back the $10,000, and then there'll be punitive damages times 2. So my understanding is that the punitive damages would not be dischargeable, but the $10,000 of stealing the money would be.
Well, it does depend on what chapter of bankruptcy, but in any event, the important thing is this: Florida's doing a little bit better than what we are in terms of police accountability, because those cops aren't going to get a blank check from the tax.
Well, they don't have the unions like we have up here. If that happened up here, I don't want to reiterate, but that's what would happen. They'd just send them home on a paid vacation. They'd sit home, watch cartoons, eat cereal, and
I think that they would be still lying through their teeth to justify what they did.
Yeah.
I think that they would try and say that the officers acted appropriately or lawfully.
We're investigating it now. But, the good thing is that came out of this, and this is one for us, and this is the power of social media. It's the power of the camera. If there was no body cam on there, it would be that man's word against theirs. But because there was video, and that video, Mr. Hodges got the video, and whether he did or somebody else did, it ended up on social media, which is how I saw it. I found it on the internet, and it was all over YouTube. And
so he didn't have a camera of his own?
No, he didn't. That was the officers. It was the female officer, Deputy Carpet Muncher's camera that got all of it. And so, they got through the sheriff's own admission, they got hundreds of calls, and the social media, they got a lot of bad press, and there you go. I mean, this is a step in how we correct the system. You have to publicly embarrass them. The phone has to ring off the hook, and we got to change qualified immunity, and we got to do something about this indemnification so that these bad cops are held personally responsible, have a dog in a fight, and this is how we're going to get rid of them, because we can't rely on law enforcement getting rid of them, because they don't. They
can't police themselves.
They don't. They cover for one another, and I'm going to finish up my statement with this. I know somebody who's a retired detective from a police department. I'm not going to say what one, but it's not the greatest police department in the area.
Central Jersey, you can say.
Central Jersey, yes. He was a detective, which is like, he has like the same rank as a sergeant, but he was a detective, and he's actually a nice guy, and he's not a douchebag like many are. And he was in the internal investigations division. And he would tell me, like, something would come down, and he would pull the cop over to the side and say, look, this is what happened. And, he would, in some respects, would try to cover. They would try to cover for things, but if they couldn't cover, then, the cop had to take the fall. And this is human nature. So, anyway, let me know. Let's finish up your comments of that, and we'll end this video.
I totally agree with everything that you said. and I'm gonna go. I have to use the men's room, John, but.
All right,
I
well,
agree
that's
with
good.
everything.
The listeners will get to know that Matt Tim has to use the men's room. And so anyway, that is Matt Tim on the phone giving us his legal analysis. And yes, Matt went to law school. And where are you licensed to practice, Matt?
Florida and California.
There you go. So he is a legitimate lawyer. I wish he would someday soon. He's going to get a license here in New Jersey. And the day that Matt Tim has a license to practice in New Jersey, there's
All hell's gonna break loose.
all hell's going to break loose, and we're going to be on the front pages because
All hell's gonna break loose, and we're gonna be on the first. We're gonna be on the first plane toward it. Oh, well,
we're going to go on the witness protection program. All right, Matt. We'll talk to you later.
Be good, brother.
Bye.